Okay, this is a recorded webinar. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending our equine webinar. Our topic today is conformation. Our presenter will be Audre Atsitty. She's the Grant Assistant for Land Grant Office at Dine College. Before I do begin, I would like to provide a brief summary of our NAPS program or project. The Native American Producer Success Project is a collaborative effort between Developing Innovations in Navajo Education, a nonprofit organization, New Mexico Cooperative Extension Service, and the Dine College Land Grants Office. The project is funded by USDA's Office of Partnership and Public Engagement, Outreach and Assistance for Socially Disadvantaged and Veteran Farmers and Ranchers program. The goal of the NAPS project is to increase profitability and long-term sustainability for Navajo farmers and ranchers. To achieve this goal, activities in 4 key areas are being undertaken to improve Navajo farm and ranch operations, to increase Navajo farmer rancher knowledge of and access to available programs and technical assistance provided by the United States Department of Agriculture, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the Navajo Nation, the New Mexico Cooperative Extension Service, the Dine College Land Grant Office, and others. To facilitate Navajo farmer rancher use of USDA's Natural Resource Conservation Service, Farm Service Agency, and Risk Management Agency programs, to strengthen the organizational capacity of the Navajo Farmer and Rancher Congress to address current and future needs of Navajo farmers and ranchers. Okay, Audre.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Audre Atsitty. I am with the Dine College Land Grant Office and have been with the program for a little over 6 years now. Sanajini Nishlon Kinyaani Bashashin Ashihan Dashache Do Tlatnasani A Dashanala Kutadana Sanshla. Today I will be covering conformation evaluation, and it has a lot to do with how your horse is built, and understanding this will allow you to, understand his quirks when you're training him, or just, why your horse does the little things he does. So what we want when we're looking for a horse is to choose the best horse for its intended purpose, whether or not you're going to rodeo, you're going to show, whether or not you're going to be team roping based on the event. So, but in doing all this, we have to remember that balance is key. And when we talk about balance, we're really talking about how your horse is built and the parts, right now we're going to take the horse apart and really just analyze every part of his body. When I do conformation evaluation, I begin with the head. You want to make sure the head of the horse is proportional to the size of the body. And this has to do with balance as he walks. So when you watch a horse walk out, you're going to notice that he moves his head up and down. And that head, you never want it too big to your horse. You really want just to even it out. Next, when I'm analyzing the head, I go on to the eyes. So you want the eyes sitting at a not perfectly, but you want it sitting at a nice spot. So an overly wide forehead or deep eye socket will decrease the degree of binocular vision, meaning what the horse sees out in front of itself. Now the horse has both binocular and monocular vision. Monocular vision meaning he can see out toward the side of himself. So the horse does have a couple of blind spots. It would be directly on top of the horse, directly on the bottom of the horse and directly behind the horse. And this would explain a lot because in nature, wild predators know this. So if you've ever seen the old Western movies or National Geographic, you're going to see a mountain lion try to take down a wild horse by jumping on its back. And that's because the horse can't see on top of itself. And so when we think about training, when we're saddle breaking a horse, the horse tends to buck a lot. And that's because nature is telling him there's something on your back. You have to get it away from yourself. And it's also cautionary that when we're training young horses, we never go in underneath the neck, or we never go beneath the horse, underneath its belly, because normally that's where other predators like snakes would go to attack the horse. And we want to make sure to build that trust with that individual horse before we start moving around their blind spot, especially on the hind end where he can't see you. So as you're training a horse, you want to make sure you're touching his hindquarters as you start moving along his back. Next is the jawline. You want to make sure that your horse has a strong, broad jaw that meets evenly. And the key word here is evenly. You don't want a horse with a parrot mouth or monkey mouth. And we'll go over these two topics in detail because both these deviations inhibit a horse from being able to chew food properly. The horse's teeth wear differently, and it will affect the bit action when you're trying to train your horse. So here's an example of a parrot mouth horse. We refer to this as the upper jaw exceeding the lower jaw. And when horses chew their food, they move their jaw in a circular motion. So do you see how the top jaw doesn't meet the bottom teeth? This means that the wear of the horse's teeth isn't going to be ideal. Horses have hypsodontic teeth. That means that they need the pressure of the other tooth to grow evenly. And when this doesn't happen, you get hooks and all these other deviations I'll go over later in detail. The opposite of the parrot mouth is the monkey mouth. And if you watch gorillas or just a segment of gorillas, you will see that their lower jaw normally exceeds their upper jaw. And here is an example of what that looks like. So next we move on to the neck. When we're looking at a horse to purchase, this is definitely one of the most important parts because we want the neck to tie high into the shoulders, at least above the point of the shoulders. If it ties any lower than that, it may cause the horse to travel heavy on the forehead. And these are the type of horses that normally exhibit lameness in their early years because they have all that weight distributed only on their two front feet. And when I talk about the point of the shoulders, it is where the scapula meets the humerus. So if you run your hands down from the horse's withers down to its shoulder, you're going to run into a little bump. It's going to feel like a ball, and this is what we refer to as the point of the shoulders. So where the neck meets the body of the chest of the horse, you want it to be above that point of the shoulder. You want a long and slender and slightly arched top line of the neck, a fine throat latch, and straight underline. This guarantees the ample length and provides maneuverability, balance, and good carriage. So here's an example of the ideal neck that we would want in a horse. The point of the shoulder meets the neck. And so when we talk about training, when we say throat latch, our throat latch is the area between the cheeks of the horse and the neck of the horse. And this really, this will really help their neck behind your bit and carry their head that way and give to the bit correctly. There are different deviations of the neck. There's the U-neck, where both the upper and lower sides of the neck arc downward. And it's called U-neck because if you look at the sheep, this is how the sheep will carry its neck. It's how their bone structure is. This creates a high head carriage and is really dangerous for you as a rider because when you pull on the bit, the horse is not going to be able to lower its head and maneuver its body under itself. Instead, what happens is that when you put pressure on the horse's mouth, his head can come straight up towards you and possibly knock you out. It's also bad because it interferes with the horse's vision and does not allow proper bit contact and control. So we talked about the horse having monocular vision. When they have an U-neck, their monocular vision is compromised because they're carrying their head so high, they really can't see what's out in front of them. And these horses tend to spook more often than others. And there's really no correcting this kind of deviation because, you know, the bones are fused that way and the muscle is, as a result, stays that way. So here's an example of a U-neck, like what I was talking about to your left. And then to your right is a horse that has a thick throat latch. Like the white horse I showed you previously, this horse has a thicker throat. His jaw, his cheekbones, they're very thick. And you want a fine throat latch because the finer throat latch won't compromise the airway. A thicker throat latch will. And these type of horses are harder to train because they also can't get behind the bit. And the problem with that is because they can't breathe due to their thick throat latch, they're going to be more skittish and anxious. After I'm done evaluating the neck, I tend to circle around the horse, and this is the time that I'm standing in front of the horse looking at its chest. The chest is only as wide as the bones that form it. You have horses that have a narrow chest. In the middle is an example of the ideal chest you want, and then you have the extra wide. Ooh. Okay, so you can see the difference. A narrow chest doesn't allow a horse to really have that power, and so that power you want, especially if it's going to be pulling something. And measure the chest from the point of the shoulder, available later on. For the extra wide chest, this horse, instead of moving forward and backward as you're riding, The rider is actually going to be teeter-tottering from the left to the right. And this also affects training because you can't really be in sync with your horse. And when you're going to conduct leg cues, it's going to be harder for you as a rider. And next we move on to the shoulders. So the ideal slope for the shoulders, which is the angle of the shoulder, you want it to be anywhere from 45 to 55 degrees. And this is going to tell you how far your horse reaches in one length of stride when it's running. Because if you have a downward sloping shoulder, this causes the horse to have a short stride. And this means that it's going to have to take more steps in their lifetime as opposed to the horses that have 45-degree angle shoulders. And these are the horses that usually have lameness because they have so much impact on their hooves. Next, we move on to the withers. So what I forgot to mention is that whenever you're evaluating a horse, you want them standing on a level plane. You want them standing on level ground, not on a hill with a slight incline. And it's really important, especially when it comes to the withers, because the withers is the meeting point of the neck, back, and the peak of the shoulders. It should be level with or slightly higher than the croup. And when we talk about the croup, it's really the part of the top of the butt. So younger horses, this is harder to identify in younger horses because when horses are growing, they actually teeter-totter with their butt being higher than their withers and so forth. So if you're purchasing a young horse and you're wanting to know if they have father, just to make sure there won't be any deviations. And again, you want a wither that is higher than or even to the level of the butt of the horse. So to the left, the bay horse is the ideal horse you would want. They have very prominent withers and they are just slightly higher than the buttocks of the horse. And to the right is a horse that has the butt of the horse that is higher than the withers. And this is what you don't want, because if you really look at this horse, they're at they call it downhill stance, meaning, so normally the power of the horse comes from the hind end and the muscles, how wide it is. And if they're running, if they're stopping at fast paces, this downward hill horse is going to have more impact on the front end. And so this will also cause lameness later in their lifetime. Next, we get to the back of the horse. So the back are the points that extend from the midpoint of the withers to the last rib. It supports much of the horse's weight. A horse, the only thing holding up the rider is the spine of the horse. The length is determined by the length of each vertebrae in the spinal column. And collection is easier for a horse with a short back. Next, we have the loin. So the loin of the horse is the muscular portion of the horse's top line. It extends from the last rib to the point of the croup. and it supports the lumbar vertebrae and transfers power from the hind and legs forward. So kind of think of this loin as a rubber band. You know, when the horse moves forward, it's able to extend and bring its hindquarters back under itself. And it's most effective when it's short and developed. So if you compare a lot of the reining horses in the industry to a lot of the racing horses, you're going to see a difference in the length of their back as well as their loin, because reining horses and cutting horses have to constantly reach under themselves and collect themselves at all times. They're faster and they're selected based on the length of their back and their loin, as opposed to racehorses who are constantly striding when they're running. So here we get into faults of the back and loin. These are things you don't want. You never want to have a horse with an extensive long back or loin, because as they age and even as they are growing, they're going to tend to have a weak back. And this makes them more prone to stress injury. So when looking at the horses, you tend to divide the horse. You want it's ideal to be able to divide the horse into 3 equal boxes. So the first box would be from the point of the shoulders to the midpoint of the withers. The second box extends from the midpoint of the withers to the loin, and then from the loin on down to the point of the buttocks. So as you can see, this sorrel horse does have a long loin. And in another example, the black horse on the bottom, this is the beginning stages of a saddleback. So if you've ever seen an older horse, their back tends to sway, and so they call that saddle a long back. Their muscles and their body structure weaken over time, so they don't have a strong back. So the next portion of the horse we'll look at is the barrel. So the barrel refers to the second on the upper right hand corner of the slide. There's the 3 boxes. And the barrel refers to the second box, which is basically the middle portion from the midpoint of the withers to the loin. And so what you want is deep and wide to accommodate heart and expanding lungs. The heart and the lungs of the horse extend and cover the entire top line of the horse. So they have pretty massive intestines. And if you take into account also just their large intestine, their small intestine, their colon, everything, the horse does really need a big barrel, because if you imagine a horse running and they're expanding their lungs, they need that space and shape to be able to breathe properly. And the only fault of the barrel is that it's shallow. Next, we move on to the forelimbs. Ideally, you want a horse to have straight legs, and we measure this by a line down to the hoof of the horse, and we want that imaginary line to equally dissect at least the horse's legs. So I do have 2 different views, the front view and the profile view of the ideal leg and different deviations. So up top, the ideal horse again has a straight line from the point of the shoulders down to the hooves, and a base wide horse, which normally is the horse with a wide chest. And these are the horses that will have you teeter-tottering left to right rather than forward and backward in the saddle. And so this imaginary line runs from the point of the shoulders, and the legs of the horse fall to the outside. And what is really important to understand is that if the legs don't are opposite to the imaginary line. So take, for example, the base wide horse. The imaginary line falls into the inside of the horse, which means the weight of the rider and the horse is going to be distributed to the outside tendons and ligaments of the legs. And this is where most of your tendon and ligament injuries will occur. Next, we moved on to the base narrow horses, and these are also normally horses with a narrow chest. So their legs fall to the inside of the point of the shoulder. And so this means that their ligament and tendon injuries will fall to the inside. And we also have deviations at the knees. So the knees can either be rotated. This will cause the horse to have their hooves pointing outwards or inwards. And so this is also an important consideration because it will affect the way your horse travels. The most dangerous deviation to have is a toed out or splayed-footed horse. This means that when they're traveling, their feet will wing in, and then their footstep will come toward the outside of the body. And this will actually, if the degree of the deviation is really severe, they will actually have their knees touching or their foot falling over each other and causing you to fall over with the horse. The next deviation is the pigeon-toed horse. So when the horse travels, their hooves will actually be swinging outwards and coming in. And then you have the bow-legged horses, which their knees are set to the outside, and the knock-kneed horses, which means that their knees are set to the inside. And from the profile view, meaning the side of the horse, you want an imaginary line that comes down from the middle of the shoulder and equally dissects the legs and falls behind the hoof. You never want the hooves too far forward, too far backward, even the knees. The same goes with the knees because, again, your horse would be more prone to tendon and ligament injuries. And then we get to the hind view. So when we evaluate the hind view, we want to make sure that we locate the point of the buttocks and draw an imaginary line down through the hocks onto the hooves. And again, ideally, we would want straight legs. Just like the front, there's the bow-legged horse and the cow-hocked horse. And from the profile view, we want a straight line from the point of the buttocks that extends down to the back of the hocks. We never want the legs to extend too far forward or too far backward. Again, due to the weight distribution on their tendons and ligaments. So all in all, we want that horse We want that horse to have a head that is proportional to the size of the body, a nice swan-like neck that will allow them to breathe and move with balance. And when we look at the side profile, we want 3 even boxes when we divide up the horse's body. And again, we want straight legs. Are there any questions?
Audrey, just by going through your presentation, when you had provided that slide for the jaw, the monkey jaw, and the what was it, the parrot jaw, we thought it might be a good idea to also have a normal jaw that a horse should have, a proper jaw. So I thought that might be kind of interesting to see, you know, so we could see the difference. It's good information. I know that I had a presenter who had also had shared with me, and I don't know if that would apply in this on proportions, but one of the things that he brought out was that when a horse has a star on his forehead, to see the balance, it should be right directly middle of the forehead, above the eyes. Is that something that you would also look at too?
So there are different theories behind that, and there have been extensive studies, but the whorl, it's not necessarily the star of the horse, it's the whorl. That's what they refer to as the spiral. That's actually used to predict the behavior of the horse, and it really doesn't, it would be nice to mention, but as far as anatomy, like structure-wise, it doesn't really affect the horse. It's used as an indication of the type of personality a horse has, and that's more related to behavior.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have questions to ask Audrey? Thank you, Audrey. That was a really good presentation. You know, when we get presentations like this, we always have a tendency to observe, and I'll be more observant with horses that I see out there, to see how, if in case one day I decide to buy a horse. I don't ride horses, so, but we have a couple we have a couple in the pen that would like to be written, and they're getting trained right now. So
Well, thank you for having me, Sadie.
yeah, you're welcome. I appreciate it. So our last slide is information about the NAPS team. Our first person that can be contacted, or any one of us anyway, Jessie Jim, she's the field coordinator, and her phone number is listed 505-609-7259. And then myself, Sadie Lister, my cell number is 928-637-5633. Sharon Sandman, she is our assistant field coordinator. Her cell number is 505-427-4262. And Jana Johnson, she's also an assistant field coordinator, and her cell number is 505-801-1793. And you guys are welcome to reach out to us. We're doing workshops, webinar workshops, and would like to continue throughout the next year. Also, just want to thank all of you for joining us. We welcome your comments so that we may provide resources of interest to better farming and ranching methods. We want to continue, or we will continue to host webinars, post information on Facebook relating to upcoming events, including monthly newsletters, videos, USDA resources and links, and recorded webinars. You can find us on Facebook at Native American Producer Success Project, and our website will be coming soon. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us. Audrey, thank you.
Thank you, Audrey. Thank you, Sadie.
Yep.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Have a wonderful
Bye.
afternoon.